Welcome, everyone. I'm so pleased to welcome you today to one of Book Passage's events, Conversations with Authors. We are so pleased to have our audience out there. I know we have a lot of longtime subscribers, and we probably have some new people that are joining us for the very first time. So again, I welcome you. Book Passage is very happy to talk to you about our two stores. We have our location in Corte Madera. We also have our location in the San Francisco Ferry Building, and both stores are currently open every day, and we're open for your walk-in traffic. So come on into the store, browse, shop. You can also order books online, or you can give us a call. Either way, we are happy to help you. And again, we are open for business. Book Passage also has a very active corporate buying program, and I just want to mention that very briefly. If you are a business owner or you would like to purchase books for clients or for your staff, Book Passage can offer you very attractive discounts. We ship all over the world, and we can often get signed copies of books. And we can also arrange for the author to do a Zoom call with your staff or clients. So if this is something that interests you, please call one of our stores. You can ask about corporate orders, and we will be happy to help you with amazing customer service. You'll be very happy. Book Passage is proud to bring you our excellent programming. Please view our website for all up-to-date events. I'm just going to mention a few exciting events that we have on the docket here. We have an in-person event with New York Times bestselling author Jennifer Egan. And Miss Egan will be discussing her new novel, Candy House, and this will take place tomorrow, April 20th, in the Corte Madera store at 2 p.m. This is a free event. No need to RSVP, just show up. This will be a lot of fun, and Miss Egan is great in person, and I think you'll really enjoy it. We also have a signing with celebrity chef Alton Brown. This will take place on Monday, April 25th at our Ferry Building San Francisco store. Chef Brown will be launching his newest cookbook, Good Eats. And tickets to this in-person event are still available. So please check out our calendar. It is on our website. We do not want you to miss any of the exciting in-person, virtual, and classes that we have taking place this month and through the summer. Here at Book Passage, our mission is to enrich, engage, and inspire. And again, a big thank you to our loyal customers. We have been a Bay Area institution for over 40 years. We are very proud of that, and we hope to continue serving you for another 40 years. Well, this afternoon, we shall dance. Toni Bentley, a dancer for George Balanchine, the greatest ballet maker of the 20th century, tells the story of Serenade, his iconic masterpiece, and what it was like to dance and live in his world at New York City Ballet during the legendary era. Bentley writes as she once danced, with grace and elegance, as she captures the haunting beauty of an art form that exists to be seen and experienced. Her command of ballet and its history is breathtaking, and this is a heartfelt tribute to a master choreographer. And if you have not seen this New York Times review, the book review, Misty Copeland has written an amazing review about this book. And I urge you all to take a look at it, because if I can't convince you, she certainly will. This is a book that you need to have in your home. Toni Bentley danced with George Balanchine, New York Ballet, for over 10 years. She is the author of 5 New York Times notable books, including Winter Season, A Dancer's Journal, Holding On to the Air, and The Surrender, an erotic memoir which was adapted into a one-woman play in 2013. Bentley is the recipient of a Guggenheim Fellowship, and her work has appeared in the Best American Essays, as well as in many periodicals, including the New York Times Book Review, the New Yorker, Wall Street Journal, the New York Review of Books, Vogue, and Vanity Fair. And this afternoon, Toni is joined by Rachel Howard. Rachel has written about dance for the San Francisco Chronicle for nearly 20 years and for Ford Review since 2015. She's the author of the novel, The Risk of Us, which the Associated Press called Simply Gorgeous. It is also available at Book Passage, and it is a memoir about her father's unsolved murder, The Lost Night, which the New York Times described as enthralling. Again, these books are available for your purchase at Book Passage. Her essays and stories have appeared in the New York Times Magazine, the Los Angeles Review of Books, Story Quarterly, and many other publications. We're going to begin our event in a moment, but I also want to remind our audience that you can submit your questions through the chat. We would be happy to take a look at them, and our authors would be thrilled to listen to what you have to say and to answer your questions. So it is a great honor and privilege to welcome to our virtual Book Passage stage and conversations with authors, two amazing writers, Toni Bentley and Rachel Howard. Welcome.
Thank you, Cheryl. And I'll just reiterate, encouraging everyone to submit your questions. I'll be sure to leave time to choose a few questions at the end. And I will hand it over to Toni to lead us off with a reading from this gorgeous book before we start our conversation about it.
Okay, great. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining. So I'm going to read from the very, very beginning of the book, which seemed appropriate. This is from the section is entitled Curtain Up. The violins begin. It is 8:07 p.m. I know this because that is when the 8 p.m. performance starts. Serenade is always first, always the opener of 3 ballets. The hors d'oeuvre, Mr. B would say, of the meal he served to his audience night after night in his restaurant, his theater of beauty. 5 minutes earlier, our handsome stage manager, Perry Sylvie, had called, "Places, please." This is the cue to take a last sip of water from the hallway water fountain beside the elevator, just beyond the backstage area. I wet my fingers and smooth down any remaining stray wisps of hair. Not a single one is out of place. It can't be. I rub a finger across my teeth to remove any pink lipstick that migrated over, and then smooth some Vaseline on my teeth. This way, if my mouth gets dry on stage, my lips won't stick to my teeth. That's a bad moment, liplessness. I have just finished sewing with big, broad stitches and thick beige crochet thread and a large darning needle, the half-inch tips of my tightly knotted toshi ribbons inside the ankle ribbons. Not everyone does this. Some just tuck them inside. I used to tuck too, but although I never had one come loose, the thought alone eventually became so worrying that I started sewing them in. It's not that your shoe would come off. That simply does not happen to a professional dancer. It's unthinkable. But that little half-inch of extra ribbon would protrude from your ankle and wreck the smooth line of your inner leg and foot. And ballet is all about lines, if it's about anything. Tying our ribbons is a practical necessity, while sewing their tips is an aesthetic one. Thus, they are of equal concern. The ends are sewn in, security. We all flock around the rosin box like hummingbirds at a feeder, rosin on the heels of the tights to anchor inside of the shoe, then rosin all over the flat toe tip, the sides, the shank. Next girl, now the water bucket. A quick dip, about 2 inches deep, with a flexed foot, shoe and all. Soaking the heel not only shrinks the satin around the ankle for extra traction, but also forms a sticky paste with the rosin inside the heel of the shoe and wrecks your tights. Despite nightly washing, they become permanently hardened at the heels, crunchy with embedded rosin. Ready. The shoes, the hair, a high tight bun, no glitter, no tiara, no pastel flower bouquets. We don't even wear the usual small stud rhinestone earrings that we do for most other ballets, which shed occasional sparkles as we move. Serenade is matte. Never in any ballet do we wear personal jewelry that would distract, indicating one's offstage life. On stage, we are other. Then the costume, the tight blue bodice secured by invisible nude elastic straps, is shaped by vertical princess seams 360 degrees around to cling to our slim torsos. The matching blue tulle to the ankles has two translucent panels running the full length of each leg in front. At 8:04, everything is secure in place. It's all I've got, all I can control. Once the ballet begins, who knows? The variables are endless. The tempos, the new girl, a blown light in the fourth wing, a slip that could end in tearful embarrassment or end your career completely with a torn Achilles tendon or a chipped hip bone. We were dancing on the edge before we knew what it was, but we knew where it was. And so I learned early on that everything, anything that is beautiful is perched on a precipice. Mr. B just placed us there, and it was trust in him that gave us balance. And I'll stop there for now.
Beautiful. Thank you, Toni. So I am just thrilled to talk with you about this book because I loved it. I broke it open as soon as I received the advanced galleys. I looked forward to returning it every night. I wanted to finish my work so I could get back to this book. And I was really struck also by the timing of it. You know, it came a few months after ballet companies around the world were returning to the stage after the pandemic. And a lot of them came back with Serenade. I mean, Balanchine choreographed more than 465 ballets. And yet this was the one that San Francisco Ballet chose for their first performance back. I think the National Ballet of Canada, I know New York City Ballet, and I think some other companies all went with Serenade as their very first ballet back. And myself, having seen it many times over the years, I can understand why. I feel like I could see it 800 times and not tire of it. I know your connection to it as a dancer is even deeper than that. And I would love to hear about your personal reasons for choosing to write about Serenade after Winter Season, which I loved, which you wrote when you were in your 20s, and then a few books that were not about ballet. Mm-hmm. And then you came back and you chose just to write about Serenade, which I think is brilliantly audacious to write a book about a single ballet. So how did this come to you that this was your next project?
Thank you so much for your kind words. Let's see. I first had the idea for this book 15 years ago, and I had a contract for it at Yale University Press. And what had happened at that time is that they came to me and asked if I would write about Balanchine, like a biography. And I knew that wasn't really the best use of my particular talents. I'm a very personal writer, even though I love research and I can do research and I have done a lot of research for various things. So I just got this idea. I said, no, I don't want to do Balanchine, but I'll write the story of Serenade, which of course is the story of Balanchine. Every one of his ballets is his story. I can say that now that he's not around. So it began first as the idea of just the history of this ballet, which I saw as the equivalent. Now, why would I choose Serenade? Well, it was very obvious to me instantly that was the one. As you say, it's very, very iconic ballet. I think it is danced by more companies in the world than any other single Balanchine ballet for lots of good reasons. He began the ballet to teach dancers, and it's doing that to this day and will continue to, as long as there are dancers on the stages of the world. And this particular ballet has a very long story. He created it in 1934, and he tinkered with it and changed it significantly until his death, which he didn't do as much with any other ballet, meaning it maintained his interest. And that was, he didn't maintain his interest in all his work in the same way. But I then decided that just doing the history of it didn't appeal to me. I can only write, I think, what I would want to read. And I don't want to read a kind of a laundry list of this is what happened in 1934. And then the costumes changed in 1936. And then they changed again in 19. So the end result is I did a lot of work. I wrote about 15,000 words, but I just put it on hold. So for the ensuing 15 years, my subconscious was no doubt working on it, but I actually did many other projects and a lot of journalism. I spent 2 years on a project about Charlotte Salomon, a great painter who died in the Holocaust. So very different subject. I came back to it because I decided I'm either going to finish this book or I'm not. It's the hardest book I have ever written. It's my most intimate book, which may surprise some people who know some of my other work, but it really is. It's about my whole life and my origins and my birthplace, really, aside from my human birthplace, my spiritual birthplace.
That leads to the other question I had about its development, which is that I think the structure for it is just brilliant, that you take us through every minute by minute of this 32-minute ballet. And by doing so, we're anchored in this ballet, a really precise recounting of what it's like to dance it. But then you take all of these wonderful digressions into not only your own career, but Balanchine's biography, the history of New York City Ballet. We get to learn this wonderfully succinct and memorable accounting of Tchaikovsky's life, digressions into Maria Caligari's development as a ballerina. I loved that section. So this ballet that holds so much is now holding so much in this book through the structure that you found. How did you figure out that you were going to use this minute by minute anchor to write this?
It's kind of interesting. This overused word we have called process, which is, so it started out as a kind of a history. I decided I'm not going to do that. And it became very clear to me early on, I don't know how, I then studied the ballet, a tape of it, and wrote down moments. And I'm kind of like borderline OCD, so it always appealed to me to give succinct moments in the ballet. But I knew I wasn't going to do every moment. I haven't counted up how many of those I do, but for all the ones that I do, if I had written down every moment of this 32-minute ballet, I'd be writing for the rest of my life and it would be 50 volumes. I kid you not. So I chose the ones that were meaningful to me and that are maybe particularly important and known to other people. And then once I freed myself from a kind of academic idea, I just decided, this is really why it took me so long, I decided to write the book I wanted to write, which felt, for a long time, I think I really didn't have the confidence, which is everything in there. The Tchaikovsky story, which is mainly centered around his writing of Serenade, but I became very kind of obsessed with him and his story because he is the musical father of classical ballet. And then Petipa, who is the other great choreographer in all of ballet history. Balanchine and Petipa are the two most famous, rightly so, in the whole 450 years history. Taglioni. So I just wrote about what really interested me. So I took pickings from ballet history. There's much more complete ballet histories elsewhere, very well done. And I just saw how all of this, like Marie Taglioni, for example, was the first ballerina, Italian ballerina, to go on the points of her shoes. And of course, and then the turnout was invented at the court of Louis XIV, which is why all our terms are in French. So I wrote about turnout and point, and all of those, of course, are in Serenade. The famous beginning of Serenade is we're in parallel and we flip open to turnout. And it is the announcement. To this day, the audience gasps when the curtain goes up on the girls with their arm up. And when they flip out, it is like an announcement. I mean, it makes me feel emotional now of Balanchine saying to me, like, he is planting classical ballet in America in 1934, which really did not exist before that. He brought the imperial, he brought the Italian, the French, he brought this entire aristocratic art to the land of democracy. And Serenade is all about that.
That's what I wanted to ask about next, all the things that Serenade is about. And I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but I also feel like you speak so naturally about it, it'll probably come pouring out. You write in the book that Serenade is, for me, a map of Balanchine's soul. You write that it is, and other people have said this, about a man and three women. And you also write that for you, it is about an artist being born. So this is all a lot to hold for a ballet that is also famous for being plotless, for being what Balanchine developed, of a story that is not telling any kind of literal plot with literal characters, except for the way that we perceive these dancers on the stage and what we perceive and what they're doing. Can you talk about how the ballet is those different things, a map of his soul, a man and three women, and an artist being born?
Sure. And needless to say, this is all my conjecture, my feeling, my opinion, and my very strong belief. But as you say, and Balanchine was extremely smart, and he knew what people were like and what audiences were like, and he absolutely refused for 50 years to explain any of his ballets, and in particular Serenade, because it is so loaded with drama that corresponds to the music that everyone's like, what's the story? Because, for example, with The Man and Three Women, there are, as it's played for many years, and in the years that I danced it, there are three lead solo girls. They're all dressed alike. You come to be able to tell them apart, and they're dressed just like the corps where I was, the 17 other girls. And at one point, one of the very famous parts of the ballet, seems to be a push and pull between this one man and two women, and then the third one comes in, and they all seem to be kind of vying for him. Then they all seem to be leading him. Then he seems to be sort of blinded, and one of them is leading him. There are so many multiple stories in this. That Balanchine knew, just let the audience, they can think what they want. And, he famously said, if you don't even want to watch it, close your eyes and listen to the music, because he was a musician before all else. And I visited him. I write about this in the book. I'll just say briefly, I visited him in the hospital when he was, from which he never returned, about a month before he died. And he had read and knew of my first book, Winter Season. When I came in the room, he said, "Oh, the writer." And then he said to me as I was leaving after this visit, he said to me, and it's always echoed with me, he said, "Maybe, dear," as he spoke, "maybe, dear, you write about a man and two women, a man and three women." And he kind of trailed off, and then he got sleepy, and I left. And while I do not think he was specifically telling me to write about Serenade, many of his ballets have triangular situations. I thought he really, to me, this is his life, because of course he had 5 wives, many in between. Balanchine and women is an entire subject unto itself. He was one of the great portraitists, but in dance, as others have done in literature, for example, of women. To whatever the dancer was on stage, he was the man. As for me saying it's a map of his soul, well, he didn't like this word soul at all. He always said, you can't see soul. I want to see a tendu. I want to see your turnout. You can't see soul. But as always, he was kind of a Sufi master. There was no more soulful dancer than his greatest dancer, Suzanne Farrell. But to talk about it is risky. To write about it is very risky. But I decided to go for broke in this book. I could only, be myself, say what I believed, and use these words, because in the end, I do feel that Serenade, even though he made it when he was 34 years old, contains the story of his life. And he was, as he famously said, a cloud in trousers. He wasn't a man, he was a cloud in trousers after Mayakovsky. He was truly, I think, some kind of a being that came, like a Sufi teacher, another kind of being who came down to teach us, to give us beauty, and to teach the dancers and audiences about beauty, about morality, about good behavior, about truth, the big things.
Yeah, that was something I was hoping you would also touch on. I loved how you wrote about Balanchine in this book, pulling in what has been shared in other biographies, but in a way where I just experienced it differently through this personal lens of having danced the ballets. And you write at one point that when he was very young, he would play at being a priest. And of course, his Russian Orthodox faith was so central to his life. And that really just stands out in my mind, that from a very young age, that was what he would pretend to be as a priest. And you also write very movingly about the sort of the spiritual atmosphere of Serenade. And it's a spiritual ritual that you're involved when you're dancing it. And I think this is connected to what you say when you say that the ballet is also about becoming an artist. So you're a non-believer, and yet you have in this book such a deep understanding of what Balanchine's beliefs were, and also being a part of it. Can you talk more about that? How was he like a priest to you in some ways? What was the spiritual environment you're in?
Well, I wouldn't limit him to being a priest, and a lot of priests these days don't have very good names. So he was something much, much greater to me than a priest. But yes, as a little boy, as children, we all play it, I don't know, being whatever we're going to be. And of all the things, lawyer, doctor, etc., that he might have chosen, he wanted to be a priest, like a bishop. And he would, at the age of, maybe 5 or 6, close the door to his room and stack chairs on top of each other. And that was the congregation, and he would conduct the congregation. And to me, it's easy to say now. I mean, he chose his profession early and he did not change. Now, yes, he was Russian Orthodox. He did not bring any of that to the theater. He didn't put that on us. We were just whatever we wanted to be, or nothing. But the atmosphere of the theater, the spirituality, if you will, was within the work we did, and within the ballets, and within the performance. It wasn't discussed. It wasn't taught as a spiritual teaching. But once you do your bar every day, every dancer knows, and hopefully some are listening, that bar you do every day, that's like an 8-year-old or a professional, or Suzanne Farrell, Anna Pavlova, Taglioni, we all start the day with our same basic steps. And this is like nuns praying in a convent. Repetition has an incredible way of teaching one. I mean, perhaps about trying to attain the impossible perfection that we go for, but it changes your being. And with us, I think the spirituality really was physically inculcated, if I can put it that way, that none of us knew it was happening, but it ended up happening. This is what a master Balanchine was, and what a privilege to have been in the world that he created. I think that Serenade, it's about many things, but one of them is definitely, I think, about the creation of an artist, and specifically a female artist. The famous image at the end where the waltz girl, one of the 3 main girls, goes up, the curtain comes down, and there's 6 kind of handmaidens on stage with their arms reaching up, And the waltz girl who becomes kind of the one. She's called the student, the initiate by people. This is all by critics. In the ballet, she's just called the waltz girl. But she is put on the shoulders of two men and a third one holding her. And she goes off upstage into the light in a back bend that is, she's going into the light, she's going into heaven, she's opening the gates of heaven. This could mean many, it'd be described as many things to many people, but it is a very ethereal, very moving image of I would say a woman triumphant after many, many losses, which I think is perhaps the story of all women.
You write in the ballet, I mean, it's a very simple fact that should have occurred to me before. I'm sorry, you write in the book, and this hadn't occurred to me before, that you were one of about 500 dancers who were hand chosen for him by the company. And I just hadn't thought of it before being limited to that number. That's right. There's only about 500 that were hand chosen for him for this company, who, as the years go on, of course, are going to leave us. And so that was really, really striking to me. And I know that you interviewed, I think, about a dozen to work on this book. And you're doing this, several books after your first book, which was you at 22 looking at Balanchine and writing it right in the moment as you're on stage. And now you're looking back and you're talking to the other dancers about him. What was it like to interview the other dancers? I'm wondering, your experience of Balanchine, your connection to him, your devotion to him is so intense. Does that feel like a shared experience? Or is it also very individual and private and so different between all of you?
It's a lovely question. Everyone I talked to, and it was quite limited, were dancers who were part of the world that I was in, his world, not post his life. While, of course, one assumes everyone, including myself, has their own sort of personal feeling about it, there is a sense of closeness and camaraderie that I've certainly not experienced anywhere else and don't expect to, between all of us who are tied together through him, because it was very much a shared experience. I mean, individually, people like Allegra Kent, she danced the lead. She was a very great ballerina. People had different experiences at different times, different roles and everything. But our shared knowledge and love of him is lifelong binding. And I do believe I speak for many of all of us, really, who knew him, who had the privilege to know him, however little. And I knew him about as little as anybody, because I thank God, talk about timing and luck. I came into the company in about 75, 76, and he died in 83. So I really was at the tail end of it.
Yeah. And you worked also with, one of his best known dancers, Suzanne Farrell, on her autobiography. You co-wrote that with her. But in this book, you spend a lot of time on the story of Karen van Aroldigen. And I think it's a really beautiful part of the book. It's much less known than Suzanne Farrell's story. And of course, she was the dancer who he gave the rights to Serenade to in his will, if I have that correct.
Yes.
And can you talk about why you chose to write about Karen and what you find moving in the relationship she had with Balanchine?
Yes. Well, I chose to write about her. To me, it was kind of a given. I didn't kind of go eeny, meeny, miny, mo. But Karen was very involved in many ways with Serenade specifically. Yes, he specifically left the rights to Serenade to her. So that is certainly significant. But she also taught it around the world, and she danced, as many people did, in, I think, 3 or 4 different roles in it, ending up as the elegy girl at the end that I just mentioned. And after he died, staged it many times around the world for different companies. She was a very unique figure in his world. Had not been, yes, some of the other ballerinas have, got their own books, are much better known. She was in a very particular place with him that was very unusual. She wasn't a typical Balanchine dancer at all. She came to him after studying kind of Russian style and relearned his technique, which is not easy. She relearned it at the age of, 18, 19, 20, almost an impossible thing to do. Her devotion to him was absolute. They had a very close relationship. It was certainly a love affair. She was also married and had a daughter. He was godfather to her daughter. He spent Christmases with her family. So it was obviously a sort of complicated situation in a private way. But I think he felt great tenderness for her for many years. He left her Serenade and other ballets. He left everything basically to 3 different women, speaking of 1 man and 3 women. In his will, in the division of all his ballets, he left it to 3 women yet again. Karin, Barbara Horgan, his longtime adored assistant. She was really a lot more than his assistant. She did everything for him. She ran his life for since 1953. For 30 years, she did that, I think. And his last wife, the beautiful Tanaquil Leclerc. So yes, I wanted to, Karin, I don't know, it seemed appropriate.
It's a beautiful part of the book, and I loved learning more of her and her story, and also beautiful pictures of her in this book too. Yeah. Well, I think we're getting pretty close to taking questions, so I would just encourage everyone to ask your questions in the chat, and they will be relayed to us. I wondered if I could just ask you one last question that might then lead to your reading, which is that another favorite part of the book for me is when you describe going to visit Balanchine in the hospital, which you decided to do on your own. You didn't tell anyone you were doing it, right?
Right.
And then there are all these touching details about the outfit you wore and just can you describe what that was like going to visit him? Tell us a bit more about that. And then we could move to your reading, and then I'll keep an eye out for the questions.
Sure. He was in the hospital for many months before he died, and they didn't know what was wrong with him. I heard there were stories of multiple doctors kind of standing at his door in the proverbial head shaking. They could not diagnose him, and they didn't until after he died. And it was Jakob Creutzfeldt disease, which is quite a rare disease, where the brain, I think, kind of turns spongy, and it has a lot of different side effects, some of which he was having, but no one, and I think it's also incurable. Could be wrong about that. So even if they'd have found out, they couldn't have saved him. He told us he'd lived, forever, and we believed him, but he was only 79 when he died. So he was in the hospital, Roosevelt Hospital. He wanted to be near the theater because it's just a couple of blocks from the stage door. And he was there for many months. And I think many people of our own volition, just felt I needed to go. I had to go. It was just very clear to me. I wasn't always very friendly. I wasn't unfriendly, but I always had my nose in a book backstage. I just decided to go alone. I didn't kind of have, a buddy to go with. And I didn't know what visiting hours, I didn't know anything. So what I wore is just, I will never understand. But the truth is that I wore red overalls. This is so astonishing to me, with a black belt, I remember exactly, and a very pretty kind of poofy, chiffony blouse with little flowers on it. I do not know why that's what I chose. And I baked him a little walnut cake soaked in brownies and in brandy, not brownies. And I went to the room, and the nurses, he had told everybody to let all the dancers come to visit him, even if it was after hours. And they all knew at Roosevelt Hospital who he was. And I think they saw an endless, curious stream of dancers and many others, kind of gawkers even occasionally, coming in to see him. And he had this big, airy private room. I went to the door. There was nobody there. Apparently there were sometimes some parties, with some champagne and, dancers and whatever. Anyway, and I had my last ever visit with him there, and I write about it in some detail in the book. I don't think I'll go into it here because I'll probably start to cry. It was brief, but as I said earlier, it ended with him saying to me, maybe, dear, you write about a man and 2 women, a man and 3 women. I think he would have kept on, a man and 4 women, a man and 5 women, And in Serenade, there's, 21 women. There's 20 women and 6 men. So maybe he'd have gone up to 20 as I see it corresponding to Serenade. And then about a month after that visit, he died.
Well, I'll just encourage everyone again to ask questions. And I know you have another reading for us, which I would love to hear, especially since this book is so exquisitely written in every sentence.
Thank you. Yes, I'm going to read actually the very end of the book, the epilogue. So I will have given you the very beginning and the very end. Okay. At the now sadly dilapidated Warburg Estate in upstate New York, where the first performance of Serenade took place outdoors in 1934, under the threat of rain, resides a small, all but obscured rectangular iron plaque, half hidden by struggling strands of grass and stained by the elements to resemble a map of America. It lies under what was the elevated stage, while the surrounding area is mostly barren, according to Eddie Warburg from that performance almost 9 decades ago. Eddie Warburg writes, we invited some 200 guests and erected a platform on a stretch of lawn, which incidentally never recovered from the shock, with rather primitive spotlight facilities and a piano hidden in the bushes. We introduced the American ballet to a rather astonished group of friends. The first scene was Serenade. With the music of Tchaikovsky, the lights went up on the assembled group of dancers, each one standing with arm outstretched, looking toward the heavens. It was a moving moment. No sooner had the dancers become visible when, as if in answer to their raised arms, the heavens opened up and it poured. First performance of Serenade was canceled. A ruined lawn, a sacred place, the American soil that begot what Lincoln Kirstein called a hymn to ward off sin, or sun. Closer to the sun, so close that 17 shading hands would ward off little, there is another, far larger memorial ground where Balanchine and Serenade lie embedded together. This one is deep and wide and resides 96 million miles from the small forgotten plaque on the sloping lawn in New York. On Mercury, a planet so close to the sun that the daily temperatures reach 800 degrees Fahrenheit, lies Balanchine, the crater. Named in 2012 by Brett W. DeNevy, a geophysicist and planetary scientist at NASA, she had studied ballet and danced Serenade as a student. The crater's location was first identified from images sent back to Earth by the Messenger spaceship on its first historic orbit of the planet. Balanchine is huge, over 23 miles wide and over 2 miles deep. Given that Mercury is about 4.6 billion years old, Balanchine, at less than 100 million years old, is termed a young crater. This is why it's still so pretty, says DeNevy. Balanchine was immediately notable to her as it spewed beautiful ejecta particles in asymmetric ray-like streaks of aquamarine light that reminded her of the Serenade tutus. This light show is called by NASA Balanchine's Blues. Perhaps Mercury is where Mr. B landed as a comet when he left us down here forming this crater that now emits the celestial beams of Serenade. Geologically, Balanchine will probably exist for at least 2 billion years, explains Denevi. But in human terms, that is technically speaking forever, long past humankind's possible existence. What a heavenly paradox of permanence for the master of the most transient art. In a mercurial elegiac stroke, Balanchine's blue rays radiate in the very same northwest direction as the final diagonal processional of Serenade. I'd like to tell him of his crater. I can see him holding up that gentle forefinger of wisdom with delight and saying again, "You see?"
Wonderful, thank you. We have a question from Simo Ballet that is a fun one. I'm really curious what you'll say to this. What has been, in your view, the dream cast of Serenade and why?
Oh my gosh, that's not a fair question. So many incredible ballerinas have brought their beauty and their particular gifts to this. Now, in my book, I write about Maria Caligari as the Dark Angel. I would mention her not only because I wrote about her for a reason, which is that for my years dancing Serenade, she was the reigning Dark Angel. She started dancing it in the workshop performance, I believe in 1974, and danced it throughout her career into the years after Balanchine's death. And she was particularly exquisite in that role. But I mean, Allegra Kent, Suzanne Farrell, Darcy Kistler, Kira Nichols, Meryl Ashley. These are all amazing dancers who have danced. Nicole Holinka. Oh, I could go on, and I'm missing some, but it's a hard question. My dream cast. It's a hard question.
That is a hard question. I guess I'll put one last question. It's also kind of a hard question, but so I love Balanchine, and I always will. These ballets have meant so much to me, and like I said, I can count just an infinitesimal amount of your connection to them as just a mere audience member. But I think it is an interesting question these days that ballet is trying to move towards, in some quarters, more leadership from women. So there's a lot of debate these days about ballet as woman and that being part of the male gaze. Do you think that this will change when the gaze from leadership is female?
We will see. I'm all for it, needless to say. Wendy Whalen is now co-director at New York City Ballet. Lourdes Lopez is running Miami City Ballet wonderfully. I believe a woman that you know, her name is coming in for the San Francisco Ballet. So this is a very welcome trend. It's the first time in 450 years of history that there's always been notable women and some notable women choreographers, but as everywhere, it's been predominantly men. And of course, the two great fathers of classical ballet in choreography so far are Petipa and Balanchine, and we'll see in time who emerges next. There are Lauren Lovett is doing really interesting things choreographing. There's lots of women choreographing. Let's see what happens. I come from the world of Balanchine, which was the man putting the woman on the pedestal, making her more beautiful than she ever could have been alone. So that is what I know. But he is gone. He is long gone. He wouldn't think it's even should be going on anymore, what his own ballets. So, time marches forward as it should. So let's see what happens. I don't know that that women, first of all, choreographers versus running a company are not always the same thing. how that changes things. It would appear to, because for Petit Pon Balanchine, ballet has always been about the ballerina. Now, I don't know that it's as simple as a female choreographer or a female leader is going to then, push the men forward. I think, ballet is woman. That is what Balanchine said. And I think it's going to be hard to change that. But the dynamics in partnering, those have changed a lot, not always to my liking, I might say, but I'm a Balanchine dancer.
Well, the art form continues on, and I'm grateful for that. And I personally would love to watch Serenade for the rest of my life and for generations to come. So I personally am grateful to what you have done to bring readers into connection to it through this book.
Thank you so much. That means so much to me, Rachel.
Thank you. This has been such an amazing event with Toni Bentley. Her book, Serenade, is available for sale at Book Passage. We are happy to help you. Come in and buy it. You can order it online. We can ship it to you. Any method you choose. We want to get you this book because it is absolutely fabulous. And again, we also have Rachel's books at our store. So so please give us a call, come in, order online. We are always here to help you. We are so pleased to bring you this hour of conversation with authors. Again, it's inspiring, it's educational, and what a great use of your time during the day. So thank you for tuning in. We look forward to bringing you more events, and take care. Buy this book, Serenade. It is definitely worth it. So again, thank you so much. Thank you, Toni. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you so much.